Welcome to the Aquamindan, everybody. We have Edward and Luke today, and today we're going to talk about Palpatine. So, Edward, would you like to give a little spiel about Palpatine and who he is?
Obviously, Emperor Palpatine is the main overarching villain in the Star Wars series. He's a Sith leader, and he is also a prominent politician, which I think makes him quite the interesting character. Because in the Star Wars legends and lore, a lot of the previous Sith they were based on pure power and brutality, and they used that to kind of, you know, seize authority and gain power over the Republic and the galaxy. Whereas Palpatine managed to do it in a more cunning, devious way that maybe we can learn from.
Mm-hmm. Luke, you want to give a little indication on his plots and plans?
Yes, once Palpatine became Chancellor of the Republic, and as the Republic was a very, very unorganized institution, there arose the Separatists led by Palpatine himself.
Mm-hmm.
And this power between and war between both the Separatists and the Republic led to the rise of the Empire, and as we know, Emperor Palpatine.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So, all this, I'm pretty sure everyone knows who Palpatine is. I mean, we just kind of wanted to get it over with if anyone doesn't know. Obviously, it's from a fictional story about Star Wars made by George Lucas in the 70s or 80s and stuff. And today we just kind of wanted to talk about Palpatine and his relation to reality. And I thought that this was a good introduction for the last two members of the Aquamindan. And I think that this is going to be a pretty good topic. So I think a good way to start off is uh, just to talk about who most people compare the Empire and Palpatine to. So, do you guys, who pops into mind when you guys think about Palpatine to reality?
Obviously, in interviews, George Lucas has mentioned Richard Nixon as a
Mm-hmm.
prominent figure who he compared Palpatine to. Uh, Palpatine gained power through war, as Richard Nixon did with the Vietnam War.
The Vietnam War was pretty interesting, especially because obviously in the Vietnam War he campaigned on the promise to leave Vietnam, which is interesting because at the same time he was going behind the government's back multiple times with the CIA to um, obviously do a lot more covert operations in different countries, even though he's leaving Vietnam. Obviously, his most famous one would be his trip to China, where literally most of Congress had no idea that he was going and he went before anyone knew. Edward, can you think of anyone that the Empire, especially the Empire, is compared to in modern history?
Yeah, I would say the two most prominent ones are obviously Nazi Germany and the United States, which is unfortunate for us because no
Mm-hmm.
one wants to be compared to Nazi Germany. But unfortunately, you can notice there are some tendencies that the two share in common with the Empire, um, especially in terms of things like colonialism, and then in the modern age, and even compared to Nazi Germany, a lot of media propaganda that incites, kind of this spirit within the people that eventually doesn't help the people. It serves to topple democracy, right? Because a huge point of Star Wars is democracy falls from the inside when you have people in fear and they rally behind a common leader who is powerful, who is charismatic, someone like Hitler maybe, in comparison to the Empire and Palpatine, and they can easily be manipulated. So I think it's important to be mindful of not only what the talking heads are saying, but what's actually being done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Most people don't like that comparison where people say that, uh, you know, the Empire is closest to government types is the United States government as well as the Nazis. But obviously, you know, I mean, let's think of the characteristics of the Empire, shall we? I mean, the first one is militarism. I mean, what's the first thing you see in Episode 4? A massive moon-sized weapon. Weapon of mass destruction, as we might say. And obviously, it took tremendous amounts of willpower and manpower and money to achieve that, just really to create fear and to promote violence in the galaxy. And I think that most people, especially in America, don't really realize how militarized the United States is. Ever since World War II, and especially since 9/11, the United States has become a heavily militarized state. Obviously, we have the biggest military in the world, so how do you not become militarized? And that's a big critique that America had of the Nazis, was how militarized they were. When we went there, we both the Soviets and the Americans attempted denazification, and the main point of that was eradicating militarism within the Nazi state that was inspired by Prussian militarism. And especially as the years has gone on, and definitely when George Lucas was around, when we were literally fighting, a war in Southeast Asia, it's a big thing that you see where the military is rapidly expanding to fight in multiple sectors of the world, just as the empire started fighting across the entire galaxy.
I will say, like, an interesting facet of that as well is, there's a time and place for militarism, especially in terms of self-defense. And both the Empire and the United States, we often justify our huge military spending by saying, we're going to defend our country, or we're going to defend the Empire, when in reality, a lot of this spending is going towards foreign affairs and, just intervening in conflicts that maybe we shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, look at just our budget itself. I mean, a big chunk of it is goes into the military. It doesn't go back to the U.S. It doesn't go back to our citizens. It goes
Mm-hmm.
into the military to fight foreign leaders, foreign powers, and to quote unquote protect ourselves from those foreign powers. But in reality, we're not getting anything from it.
That's true. It's like, for example, the Empire is a great representation of that. I think that obviously, like Edward said, militarism has its time and place because, like, think of it as if you're getting invaded, obviously you got to fight them back. Duh. You're just sitting there like a duck and just get killed. It's like that's dumb. But it's also both interesting how I think the Empire is a great example in a comparison to the United States, because you have to think not like I don't think it's a great comparison with the Nazis because the German state was already militarized. Like genuinely, like let's think of the Republic, right? The Republic for like hundreds of years was demilitarized. 1,000 years apiece, right? If you ever see the Star Wars propaganda posters, they promote that. Well, I mean, think of it. You had Prussia, the German Confederation, the German Empire, and then Nazi Germany. And it's like, this was just a progression of Prussian tradition of militarism. And it's like the Republic, it wasn't. Except till the war happened, he, secretly created a military that the Republic then used to fight this fake threat, the CIS. He slowly militarized society. And then once the threat was gone, the threat is gone now, right? Oh, now we have to worry, right? We have to keep the military. Even though, not gonna lie, the Empire was more secure than the Republic was before the Civil War. And so, if we think about it like that, that's a great example of America. Because, okay, we beat the Nazis and the Japanese. Oh, wait, these crazy Russians are gonna beat us, right? And then people are like, well, they could have hurt us or whatever, so it was justified to keep the military. Okay, let's assume that argument's right. Well, what about in 1991? Why didn't we drastically decrease military spending after the Soviet Union collapsed? It seems like all these justifications for this rampant militarism never die, right? They just keep coming. Oh, we got attacked in 2001. Now it's a war in the Middle East. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it
So,
runs deeper than militarism. The U.S. isn't shy about controlling its citizens. We see with the Patriot Act after, as you mentioned, the attacks on 9/11 in 2001.
mhm,
I mean, this act was proposed to control us as citizens of the United States. And this is similar to the dystopian world that the Empire uses. There's spies everywhere. There's cameras looking at everyone.
mhm,
And this is just to force out, citizens from rebelling against the Empire.
mhm,
I will say, in terms of things like the Patriot Act, in in principle, and I'm sure people who supported the bill as well it wasn't all done in bad faith. Obviously, there is a need for national security at the time, but the point isn't necessarily whether, it's good for people to be surveilled or not. Um, the point is there are people that supported that bill that knew what they were doing. They were exploiting the fear of the people at the time, and they kind of used that as a backdoor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and these types of acts are very hard to reverse once they're put in place. So the problem is the principle that um, it's kind of like we're using this opportunity to take away some of your rights, but you're not going to have the opportunity to give them back once they've slipped up, right? These
Mm-hmm.
are ours to keep now. So we can have this control over you. And not everyone who supported the bill wanted that, but there are some people who supported the bill for that reason because they knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, like, going back to the Empire, uh, I think that it's a good thing to say that what we've seen with Palpatine is something that has never, at least to my knowledge, has been done. Where there has been a leader who was able. I mean, there's been leaders who's been able to brew fake political parties to try and boost him, or it's create a separate threat. I mean, for example, Hitler, when the Reichstag burned down, which he probably did, he blamed the communists, but he didn't make Germany go into a civil war where they then he controls both sides. Usually you just create fear by just using your enemy who already exists, but he created the enemy, which is I think really fascinating, and it just shows how um, even though he's a great example of how democracies fall and how you can corrupt the system, or he can centralize corruption in a decentralized system, and you can't find that in, at least as we know of, modern society. But I do still think that it is a good, fascinating example for how democracy dies, which is a great, great quote from the movie.
I know it is hard to find an example in our history of a political leader being both the enemy and the friend of its own nation,
Mm-hmm.
being the leader of both the enemy and the friend of his own nation. But it's it's interesting. We can still think of two sides of the same coin, right? We think
Yeah,
of
because you really don't need to create. I mean, I think that the another thing you have to think about with Palpatine is he had to create a big enough enemy. Like he was almost forced into a corner because there was no way. Like obviously we talked about how the politics. I mean, if you have think about it, you have thousands of systems in this galaxy. How are you going to be able to create a political block in your lifetime that's going to be able to be a strong enough opposition that eventually is convinced to fight the main parties? So what he does is he's like, okay, I'm not gonna screw this over. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna uh, artificially create it. Not like slowly support it. Artificially create it, and then when the war starts, obviously he says he works for the CIS and he runs it, but like he wants the Republic to bleed. He wants it to feel fear, but he never wants it to lose. Because if it lost, the CIS had really charismatic leaders. Dooku, well, I don't want to call Grievous, charismatic, but um, yeah, to be fair, I genuinely don't know any other CIS leaders. I'm gonna be so for real.
There's
I know
the flying, all the flying bug dudes, and there's like Newt Gunray.
Gian knows. Oh yeah, I always loved how I think that there's an episode in Clone Wars where you actually see their assembly, and it's interesting how it's usually a bunch of alien planets, which is interesting. I don't know if most people know about that, but in Star Wars, there's a big thing about racism towards aliens. It's not really ever said in the George Lucas films because I don't think that was the message, but it kind of was because no stormtroopers were aliens, but in the Clone Wars, it's mentioned because it shows how many of them felt like they weren't treated the same as the humans. Even there's not interhuman racism; it's interspecies. And I thought that was interesting. Also, that he stoked the most antagonistic flames to try to break them free. Because when you go to that one monkey planet, right, lemur planet, I think, where they were like some of them were wanting to join the CIS. This was in a Clone Wars episode.
Oh, yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. The guerrilla warfare one. I think it was.
Yeah, because they
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to
yeah,
join
yeah.
because they're like, you Republic never cared about us or whatever.
It is interesting how George Lucas did. He plotted little symbols within the whole of Star Wars. We see,
I
as
love it.
mentioned, guerrilla warfare, episode
Hmm.
6, right? I mean, is that not is that a symbolism of
Yeah,
us in Vietnam?
it's super cool to learn about, especially because like the CIS, like it's supposed to be a confederacy where every single system has its say. I don't know if you guys know this. I actually learned it not too long ago that even the U.S. Confederacy, like the United States Confederacy, when it split off, it was supposed to be like every state has the same voice. Literally, as soon as it became independent, they centralized the country instantly. So like when people argue, it's like, oh, it would have failed or whatever. It's genuinely funny because if they were independent, it would have just been really the same system as the United States, almost exactly the same. It could have been even more authoritative, most likely. And that's exactly what happened in the CIS because obviously who's running everything? Dooku and Palpatine. It's like no, definitely no one has a say besides the upper elites who are running the war, and that's what would have happened after, even if. But
I was thinking just now. It's like we were struggling to come up with a comparison of, you know, one leader being in control of both sides. But
mhm,
instead of it being a leader, if it's more like an organization that that causes the same effect, right? So the CIA, obviously we funded the
mhm,
Taliban to go fight the Russians, right? And then that kind of created the enemy, you know.
mhm,
And maybe that wasn't intentional, but it kind of had the same effect as the
yeah,
CIS fear.
yeah. It's like I do agree, but it's like it's not like he was running the Soviets. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like that's why it's so profound to think about. And I genuinely, to be fair, I do think it will happen. I mean, if it can be told, it can be born. I think that someone out there could have that same plan eventually one day. Hopefully not, because it's so evil. But
Could be
I do
happening
think,
right now,
huh?
and we could be happening right now, and we just don't know about it.
It definitely could be happening right now. But that's a fun topic for another time. But I definitely think that uh, such a convoluted plan can happen one day, and it probably has. I mean, let's think of the countless civil wars a place like Rome or China has, where you just have everyone battling everyone in multiple sides. And I mean, there's been multiple times where a war's going on, but the leader's in charge, which is weird. But only like political parties are fighting. Because like for example, in the last video I made about the Rwandan genocide, the president was trying to compromise between like both sides while they're fighting each other
Yeah.
because no matter what, he just cares about staying in power. He doesn't. He'll help one and then help the other, and then they're killing each other. So, you know, uh, in Germany too, the Hindenburg was just kind of trying to play off the communists to the Nazis, and only when the Nazis tried to like convinced him, I guess, that the communists were worse, did he give in to one side, even though he hates both. you know,
And
but
it is impossible to directly
what
relate
is?
an intergalactic war from a long time ago to our
Mm-hmm.
little interplanetary relations. But I think it's fun to ponder, and it's fun to think about.
Mm-hmm. We really wanted to talk about this topic just because this is a good intro to these two members. They're very soon going to start making their own videos on their own topics, and I'm really interested to watch them, and I think you guys should too. I think it'll add some flavor to the channel and obviously give it more perspectives and influence. But they will be joining whenever they can. They're very busy people. I am not, so that's why we're doing this. But uh, this was just a topic on Palpatine, and thank you guys so much for watching. This is Edward and Luke again, and we hope to see you guys next week. Bye, y'all.